There we go. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world. Femi Kayode is my guest today, and my friend, we're going to be talking about his new book called Gaslight. And some of you may have seen the program we did when Lightkeepers came out. Remarkable series of books you have going there. Um, so Femi, welcome. It's great to see you again. And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Hello.
Hello. Yeah, no, I
Happy
can
New
hear you.
Year, Patrick. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. I think there might be a slight delay, but
Okay, good.
yeah, but you can hear me okay? Yeah.
I can hear you okay, although my internet is telling me it's a bit unstable, but it's fine. I think we can push through. The last time we spoke, I was in the US, so we didn't have this much technical issues.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Are you in Namibia right now?
Yes, yes. I'm in Namibia, in
Namibia.
Southern Africa. So
Right.
it's sort of like at the edge next to the Atlantic Ocean, next to South Africa. Above is Angola and Zambia and Zimbabwe.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, we're going to get into this terrific book. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, maybe you can tell our viewers, our audience about your own background. You have a very interesting background story. You were trained as a clinical psychologist. You've done a number of TV shows. Can you talk about your life before you started writing novels?
Oh yeah, I don't know. It's not that interesting. I did. There's a lot of talk about this whole clinical psychology thing that I always find very interesting. And I've always told my publicists on both sides of the Atlantic to say, maybe we should remove it from my profile because I never practiced. I actually went into clinical psychology because I was a lot more curious about myself than I was about other people,
Hmm.
about how my brain worked. It was almost like self-therapy to a certain extent. And I remember my dad kept on saying, "What are you going to do with this? What are you going to do with this? You're either a doctor or you're not a doctor." Kind of thing. And I truly enjoyed it, I must say, because my first degree was in animal science. And then I did my master's in clinical psychology. Um, and I never practiced. It was a 2-year program. And by the time I finished and did my internship, I already got a job in advertising and I was already enjoying it. And it's very interesting. I did get the job in advertising because of my background in clinical psychology, because they were looking for somebody that had a science background to work in, the medical products field. I remember my first project was actually Zoloft, which was actually an antidepressant,
Right.
kind of thing. So it all just seemed to all come together. And so this idea that, one studies clinical psychology and then you practice it somehow. I did practice it, but not in the traditional way. I was writing a lot of product description, a lot of case notes for Pfizer then, the big bad pharma kind of thing. And I really enjoyed it, I must say. It was one of those few moments when it seemed as if all my interests came together inside one, my love for writing, what I studied, my science background, everything just sort of came together, at that particular point in time. And I've been in advertising now for, I would say, what, 23 years now, um, working in different areas in terms of creative, working as a copywriter, working as a creative director, working as a strategist, and I'm still doing it because, contrary to popular opinion, until you become James Patterson or J.K. Rowling, you know, writing doesn't pay that
Doesn't
much.
pay the bills.
Doesn't
Or
pay that much. Yeah, yeah.
until you get a good movie deal or something like that, right?
the movie deal is not, again, I've been writing screenplays, I've been writing screenplays for a very long time. Like I said, I've written in different genres and different platforms. The movie deal, I don't know whether it's going to make such a big deal, big difference. I think to a very large extent, the writing is becoming fulfilling in itself, is becoming its own. You get to that age when you realize that you're not going to be Jeff Bezos and just make peace with it.
Right.
You make peace with it, especially at our age, Patrick. We just realized, okay, it's fine now. We just want to enjoy what we do, and that's a blessing in its own on its
Absolutely.
own. And so that's where I am. I'm enjoying what I do. I'm enjoying the stories that I'm telling, and I hope that I'm becoming a better human being as a result of that, of telling those stories. That's the best I can hope for at this point. The kids are fine, the family is fine. We have a roof over our heads, and we can feed ourselves, and we still have our Christmas tree up. So that means that
Yeah.
everything is yeah.
It
That's the
is
best you can hope for.
it is a privilege to be able to do something that you enjoy doing, and something that is fulfilling. A lot of people don't.
Absolutely.
A lot of people are stuck, working jobs that they despise, just to put food on the table, you know.
hmm it's a blessing, and one that one should not take for granted. Um, but also I'm also very privileged because all of these experiences, like I said, you're more than the sum of your parts. And I'm finally in that space where I really feel that, in age, in experience, in training, in background, in everything, in even where I come from as a Nigerian, everything just seems to be coming together, and it's fashioning my future forward journey. And so I feel quite yeah, quite complete. Maybe that's the word. I don't want to say grown, but complete. I feel like I'm ready for the next 25 years. Knock on wood.
Wow. How many of us can say that? That's great. Um, I wanted to ask you, maybe as an introduction to our discussion about your books, I thought maybe we'd go back and have you talk a little bit about the first book for the people who aren't familiar with the Light Keepers. This second book opens 1 year after the events in the first book, and that case of is it the Okriki 3 case?
The cricket three.
Yeah, and that was
Yeah,
talk a little bit about that.
Lightseekers was, like one of those surprise things. I went to school to study creative writing. I wanted to, I really wanted to write a novel, and I didn't feel I had the discipline to be on my own and write a novel. And I felt I needed to go to school. And somehow I finished the novel, which was my thesis, and it won the Little Brown Award. And I got a publishing deal out of it. And so that was a very interesting experience, a lot of exciting milestones in that space. But Lightseekers is really based on a true event, on an event that actually happened in Nigeria, where four undergraduates were lynched by a mob, and they were murdered by a mob. And you can still see it on the internet. You can see it on YouTube, where they were mobbed because they were suspected of being armed robbers. And these were undergraduates, and it really sparked a lot of outreach in people all over the world when they heard about it. But for me, it sparked a lot of questions. You know, how can we be like this? How do people do this to people? We're constantly in that space where we're always talking about how bad governments are, how bad institutions are, but we rarely talk about how bad people are to people. I don't know how bad people are to people. Um, so So Lightseekers was really me trying to find answers to some of these questions about, um, myself, about being a Nigerian, about Nigeria itself, about so many issues at that particular point in time. And I think I was naive enough to think that I could do it, and I did it. Yeah. So I used my curiosity and my questions to drive the story, in creating this character called Philip Taiwo, who went to investigate the why. So we knew who did it, who killed these boys. It's out there on social media. But
Right.
then he now had to find out why. Why did they do it? And I realized that I fell in love with this idea of context is everything.
Mhm.
This idea of what you can say, what you call the sociological crime story, the sociological, you know, thriller, so to speak. And I became enamored with this idea of, telling stories about how we as Africans, specifically Nigerians, I'm living in Namibia now, so I hope you tell a story about Namibia one of these days. How we got to where we are, and to give a narrative that is very different from what you see on CNN, or what you see on Fox News, or what you guys would see on your local American media. Because all you see about Africa is all the strife and conflict and all that, but we never quite say, how did we get here? How did all of this, how did these pieces of this puzzle work together? You know, uh, People don't like war. Nobody wakes up in the morning and say, "Today I'm going to bomb." You know, nobody
Right.
does that. Something led us to it. Something led, especially when we're talking about groupthink, which is something that fascinates me a lot from a sociological point of view. When you talk about groupthink, how by telepathy do people communicate intentions with each other, especially when it's a crime? How do they communicate this intention to each other? Was it lying subliminally
Mhm.
inside people, and you just pick up the phone, or you just bring out a gramophone and say, "Guys, come out now. Let's just go stomp the White House." you know,
Right, right, right.
or yeah, or do we plan it? Or is it, are we actually victims of some kind of a puppeteer, that actually knows exactly, what you would do if they press the right buttons? And so for me, Lightseekers is exactly, you know, really asking those questions and really exploring those questions. I can't say I gave the answers, but at least within the specificity of that story, I was able to create some kind of a thinking man's answer, in terms of what could have been the reason why these people would do this to these three boys.
And it's as you say, it's not a these it tends to be overly simplified by the press, the causes and conditions. And, as somebody just said, people tend to watch the news for sensationalism, you know. And yeah, and also in your books, your character has a unique perspective because he's lived in the United States. And in this new book, especially, family is a big part of the story, because his children were raised basically in the United States, and now here they are in Nigeria. Um, and and they're used to a different lifestyle, a Western lifestyle, and that conflict is front and center in the book, or at least, and there's so many things going on with this new book. Um, I'll ask you to get into some of those things. It seems to me that Taiwo and Chica, I love the character of Chica. They're both it really is a partnership in a lot of ways. They function so well together in these cases. Um, First of all, can you tell people about Taiwo? He's not a detective. He's not a cop. He is a forensic psychologist or an investigative
Mm-hmm.
psychologist. Um, And so he's almost like the cerebral, it's tempting to say he's the Sherlock Holmes kind of character. Not quite the same, but Chica, as I say, they work together really well.
Yeah, Philip is an investigative psychologist, which is an evolving space in psychology that sort of came into prominence sort of in the started sort of in the late 70s, early 80s, but really took some prominence in the 90s. Which is really a very, very interesting space where it actually tries to, I call them the auditors of investigation. They actually, and I get this question a lot, is there really a field called investigative psychology? And how is it different from forensic psychology? Um, it's investigative psychologists try to ensure that the process of investigating crime is done to what you can say best practice, so that when we actually go to court to prosecute this case, we know not only why it happened, we know what happened, we know the motivations, and we know that the police, in terms of the procedural, went through the right process. So, for instance, they did not get a confession under duress, for instance. What's the circumstances under which, the crime was committed, and so many other things. So it's a very, very broad, almost academic field, in a sense, compared to forensic, which is very much forensic. What happened, how did the gun go through the body, where did they get the gun, crime scene investigation, and all of those kind of things. So it's a very interesting field, but it does exist. So Philip is an investigative psychologist. Um, and Chica, he met when he was doing his first case in Nigeria, and Chica was a mercenary, um, and he now owns a security company, a cyber security company, where he uses his bronze to help Philip solve some of his cases, or to look into some of his cases. Chica is very interesting. There are three characters that I designed in the books, or in the stories, and it's Chica, who I call the bronze, the muzzle. It's Philip's wife, who I call the heart, the heart of the story, the voice of reason, so to speak, and Philip himself, who is the academic. I don't know whether he's a Sherlock Holmes. There have been so many iterations of Sherlock Holmes nowadays that I don't know who Sherlock Holmes is anymore.
Yeah,
I don't know whether he's a superpower,
yeah.
ultra intelligent. I
It's
don't know
not
whether
a
he's a flawed hero.
not a good
I
not a good
really don't know
comparison.
anymore.
Yeah, it's probably not the best comparison.
Well, yeah, I think it's closer to Watson, though. I think it's
Yeah,
closer to Watson. He puts in the work. Um, he's all heart, and he doesn't have what you can call the typical flaws. He's not an alcoholic. He's a family man, and he has all the normal issues, what you can say a family man would have, that is relatable, and that's very, very deliberate for me. I didn't know how to create a character that had so many flaws, this unlikable flaws, to make them more fascinating. It almost seems like spectacle for spectacle's sake, because there are tons of police officers or investigators, for instance, in the United States, that are just normal people doing their job,
right, right.
kind of thing, just doing their job, and doing it very well too, and same thing over here. On the continent, there are quite a number of people that are just doing their job. They're teachers, they're nurses, there are um, artists, musicians, or whatever, that are just, for lack of a better word, just regular. I don't want to use the word normal. They're regular, they're regular people. with sometimes irregular issues that they have to deal with once in a
Mm.
while in their lives, and I really wanted to create a character that people could relate to on that very primal level, and that's why his family features a lot in his story, in these stories. In Lightseekers, he was suspecting his wife of having an affair. Um, we don't know whether she was or she wasn't, so I'm not gonna give that away because the book is still on the shelves. So please get it. But in this particular one, he's having problems with his teenage daughter, and he needs to step up to the plate as a father while still going on with this very, very important investigation, which, by the way, he's being paid very good money for, and he needs it, not because he's broke or whatever, but he needs that validation that, in Nigeria, he's sort of like a fish out of water. He's trying to find his place, and he gets this job that is actually going to, add to his resume because he's preparing to go back to the US after his wife's sabbatical. So there's a lot that's happening there deliberately,
Right.
to actually tell the reader that life is messy, and your life might be messy now, but there's someone that gets you in a way, kind of thing.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Now, I wanted to ask you about, well, let's talk a little bit about the case in this book. There's a bishop, kind of a charismatic sort of preacher figure, um, who will be very familiar to American, you know, readers, because we have these whole mega church phenomenon here in the United States, of course, they're everywhere. Um, and he has been arrested in suspicion of his much younger and not particularly well liked by the congregation wife. And I think he's our age, he's in his early 50s, and she's in her mid 20s, and is kind of a contentious figure. Uh, Tell us a little bit about where this particular story came from. Was it also based upon a real case?
No, not really, to be honest, but I think it's based on a series of anecdotes, um, that I, as a practicing Christian, I've experienced in organized religion,
Hmm.
but it became a very pertinent story. And I pitched this story along with Lightseekers, by the way,
Oh,
with my
really?
publishers. Yeah. And, I pitched about 3 or 4 stories, and they said, that's the one after Lightseekers, that's the one, and they never changed anything. They never suggested a new title. They never suggested, new characters or whatever. It was just like, this is a story whose time has come, kind of thing. And I felt it, and the support that I got for it, because it really became more pertinent after during the Trump era,
Hmm.
to the extent, and I'm not speaking simply because the Poison Pen is American, but I think for those who read the book, or who are going to read the book, they can see the parallel in Philip's experience with organized religion in the US,
Hmm.
and organized religion in Nigeria. That's very deliberate.
Right.
But it was the extent to which the evangelical organized religion groups aligned with some very questionable political decisions,
Yes.
you know. Um, and I found it totally unbiblical, for lack of another word. It was very unbiblical. You know, we had lots of pictures with evangelical pastors laying hands on Trump, for instance. And to be fair, I think even in American politics, we've had, Bill Graham in those days. We've had quite a number of religious leaders, aligning with political leaders, but it has never been so brazen in a sense, especially when we're talking about ideological issues in terms of the LGBTQ group, in terms of Israel and Palestine, in
Right.
terms of there's so many fundamental issues, Roe versus Wade, for instance, that you like, is this the is this the right time for the church to be so political? I mean, we always knew you were political, but is this the right time kind of thing? So it made me very, very curious to know about, to sort of look into the dynamics of what's happening in there. So when you ask whether it's a real story or it's based on a real event, not really.
Hmm.
Sadly, what is happening in the real world is actually a lot worse than
Yeah.
what I have, presented. It's a lot worse, and that's very sad. With Lightseekers, it was inspired by true stories, by a true story. But in this case, in the case of Gaslight, it's inspired by a series of true stories, that's been sort of like synthesized into this one big issue. Um, but for me, I think it's very sad that I think it was David Baldacci that said this in one of his master classes that I really enjoyed, and was talking about going to an FBI agent and asking an FBI agent, "Can this happen?" And then the FBI agent answered and said, "Trust me, if you can think it, it has already happened, and it's much worse."
Right.
you know,
Right.
if you as a fiction writer can think it, trust me, it has already happened. We've already thought about it. And that's exactly the same situation with Gaslight. The extent to which that it has already happened and it is happening, you know. That's one. The second thing that I think is very important, why the title Gaslight is there, was also the idea that every single time when we talk about gaslight, at least in most cases, don't let me generalize too much. In most times when we talk about gaslighting, we talk about it in personal relationships, a narcissist in a domestic situation and all that. And I think that we've really used that term when we're talking about groupthink, when we're talking about narcissism, when we're talking about apartheid, for instance, when we're talking about, when we're talking about this whole idea of how do you manipulate a large group of people
Right.
to believe a lie, because that's exactly what gaslight is, to believe a lie, you know. And for me, that's what really fascinated me about the mega churches, and all that. How do you convince thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people to believe a fundamental lie, especially when there is proof that it's a lie? Because all you have to do is just go into the Bible, and check what Jesus said about any number of issue that you want to talk about. If you want to talk about, I mean, we hear a lot. No, there was no issue with Roe versus Wade, in the Bible, but yeah, there was no issue. But he did say, "He that has no sin cast the first stone." you know,
Right.
he did say that. You know what I mean? So it's somehow it seems quite convenient. It's convenient that we sort of like we cherry pick the parts of holy books, and it happens everywhere. In the Quran we have it. That's why we have ISIS, for instance, fundamentalist groups, cherry picking these issues. And that's what I was very fascinated about, that the proof is there. All you have to do is pick up that so-called holy book, open it, and friggin' read it.
Yeah.
Just read it, in your language, because it's most likely to already translated into any given language you can call you right now. And so it was very fascinating for me, and I think that is one of the sincerest thing about the book, that I was genuinely curious about how somebody like Bishop is able to convince a large group of people about concept or an idea, supported by who. And just one last point where that's concerned is that I found out that there is no gaslighting situation that is not enabled by either the society or the systems, the institutions, or the individual themselves. there's no there's no manipulation that exists in isolation. We are sometimes willing victims. We actually put ourselves in that situation,
Right.
and I think that, yeah, that's really something that I wanted to explore. And the last thing I think that was very interesting for me that I felt I wanted to do, maybe the psychologist, the cheeky psychologist part of me was like, I wanted the reader to feel gaslit.
Yes. Yes, you definitely get that sense. Um, before we started talking, there are any number of spoilers that we can't really get into, but
No, we don't want to. You can
but
hear me trying to work around it.
it's it kind of reminds me a little bit of a James Elroy novel in the sense that just when you think you've peeled off the last layer of corruption, there's another layer to be peeled, and that's certainly the case in this book. Uh, we won't tell you any more about that, but
I love it. And thank you so much. You called James Elroy. I love James Elroy.
I do too.
Um, I really do. But yeah, and I think it's easier when you start talking about context. When you start using psychology, sociology, and all of those things, and you're not just plot driven, but you're
Right.
actually character driven. It becomes easier as characters reveal themselves through action. It becomes much more easier for you as the writer, and you actually give the characters some kind of free rein, to I know a lot of writers don't like to talk about that, this idea of giving the characters free rein. I think you have a lot of control as a writer, as a storyteller, uh, from a plot point of view, but to really be authentic in terms of how you deal with the characters, you need to let them operate with free rein around the rules that you have created in the plot. You know, um, Somebody said something to me that I thought was really, really very, very fascinating. I never thought about it that way. That gaslight is about the weaponization of corruption.
Huh.
And I thought it was that. You just blew me away because that's exactly what it is. It's like, it's how do you that when when you know a society so well, and you know how they would operate, and you know the systems, and you know the institutions and how they interact with each other, and you're able to turn it on its head and say, how am I going to make it work for me? How am I going to use it for my agenda?
Right.
And I realized that actually we all do it. We all do it, on a daily basis. We actually do it. As soon as that's what we call home. When you understand a space so well that you can manipulate it to suit your agenda, that's home. That's your comfort zone,
Yeah,
you
that's
know.
right. That's
Anyway,
right.
but it's just something I wanted to point out.
No, that's very true. Tell us a little bit more about the young wife. She's 25 years old, as I was starting to say. And is her name Sade? Is that correct? Or
Shade, yes.
Sade, like the singer, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
deliberately chosen so.
Yeah. Tell us about
Yeah,
her.
I think she's my favorite character in the book.
Really?
She's my, she's my favorite character. I really, really, really love her. Um, I really wanted to create a character that was a victim that had agency. I wanted a victim that had power, and I remember while I was writing it, every time I tried to describe this character to my my beta readers, to my editor, I never could find the right word. But then in the middle, I think I had just finished it and I needed to do some editing, just some refining it to the character so that it comes out sharper. I watched this movie called Promising Young Woman by Emerald Fennell. And it was starring one of my favorite actresses, Carey Mulligan.
Mm.
And I watched it and I was like, That's it. That's her. That's her. You know, she feels deeply. Um, she she is an example of people that go into organized religion spaces or cults or institutions with a lot of naivety, a lot of hope. And what I wanted to do was really to create a character that mirrors the damage that can be done if we do not honor the naivety of people that come into these spaces and their honesty and their and their and their zeal, you know. So Shade was 25 when she met the bishop and she married the bishop. And so by the time the story starts, she was actually 30. So she's been married
Oh,
for about
okay.
5 years.
Right, that's
Yeah,
right.
I don't know whether you remember. There's it's not a spoiler, guys, but there was a particular scene where a lady said, "I'm the one organizing her birthday party because she's coming into our own because our Lord came into his mission when he was in his 30s, kind of thing." So
I see.
yeah, so yes, she came into that space at a very impressionable age, which is very reminiscent of how a lot of people come into those spaces. Very impressionable, just finished school, met this bishop, and fell in love. To be quite fair, and we fell in love with the space. And she is I just think I wish I was a bit more like her, a bit ruthless. I think there was a book written by Martin Amis. I can't remember it about a woman that she was a professor in the university. She had everything going for her. She was as beautiful as Marilyn Monroe or whatever. And she died and nobody could say whether it was suicide and or whether she was murdered, and the police officer just got obsessed with this woman that had this perfect life and could not understand what could have happened and what could have gone wrong. And those are some of the characters that sort of like shaped my design of Shade. You know, just this idea that she is someone that came in as one person and came out as another person, and there is no middle ground. You know, it's extremist. She's an extremist in either in every situation. You know, and you don't have to agree with her choices. That
Right.
again, I find fascinating. You don't have to agree with her choices. You don't have to agree with uh, her actions, but she certainly has reasons for it. You know, I think one of the things that is not a spoiler again. One of the things that I really liked was sort of ripped from a Dolly Parton speech once in a concert, and was talking about when she did her hair, put and pierced her ears, and then her mother said, "Oh Lord, what have you done?" And then she said, "No. Give credit where credit is due. I did it all by myself," kind of thing. You know, and Sade is sort of like that. She took agency and she took pride in her decisions because she has thought it through. And I wish I could be more like that as a person.
And there are, I wanted to ask you about the point of view. It's mainly told from Philip's point of view, but there are these little bits where we actually hear her voice. Was that something that you had from the very beginning, or did that come later?
Absolutely from the very beginning, I needed to hear her. I needed to hear her voice. In fact, the biggest challenge I had, which my editors helped me with, thank God for them, was not to give. Philip had to find it out before you give more information. Philip
Yes,
constantly had to find it out, or else the reader would be one step ahead of your hero, which
right.
apparently is a no. I don't know why. But but really, to be quite fair, I get it a lot because sometimes I placed those interludes. I call them interludes. Her point of view, a bit too early or a bit too late. but they were always part of the design of the story, that we wanted to hear her voice. We wanted to hear how she's thinking, why she came to this decision, and what was her lived experience in the church and with the bishop, and why is she doing this? Why is she doing this? Because the bishop is such a nice guy. This is somebody that has, millions of people that depend on him or listen to him, watch him. I really feel, without giving away any spoilers, I think that having her point of view validates the validates her existence. I didn't want a helpless victim that we're just, the blonde girl strangled in the middle of the night. And,
Yeah.
I didn't want that. I wanted someone that had a voice and that had, like I said, that had agency. And you can actually see, oh my God, And again, she was also a very nice trick for the gaslighting of the reader, because then
Yes.
you're not quite sure, is she there? Is she not there? Where is she? Who is she talking to? And it was also a reality check for the reader, because I've gotten some feedback and people say, but who is that person speaking? I'm like, duh.
Right.
It would, because if you carefully read those short interludes, there are lots of clues in there that
Yeah.
can tell you who
Well,
is who.
at first
Yeah,
you're
go on.
at first you're not sure who she's speaking to, who is she addressing? Um, and then it begins to become clear,
Exactly. And if you remember, the book is divided into three parts,
right?
and it looks at the laws of gas, and then it combines it with what the Bible says about light, and by the third part of the book, you start getting a very strong impression of who she actually is talking to, you
Yeah.
know, because as soon as you figure it out, you're like, oh, and it's almost, and this is a no-no. I try to tell my fellow writers never ever to do this, especially when I'm tutoring. Uh, don't put your reader in a situation whereby you want them to go back and say, did I miss something? But actually, in this particular case, you might want to go back, because there are not a lot of those interludes. You might want to go back and say, oh, this one is to that person, and this one is to this person, and this one is to
Yeah.
that person. And that is something that I deliberately left open for the reader to feel that sense of, I know something Philip doesn't.
Yes. Yes, that sense of discovery. Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
really well done. Um, so another thing that makes it very personal, a very personal story to Philip is, of course, his sister, Kenny, who is not, she's a member of the congregation of this church. Uh, and so she pro she provides an interesting counterpoint to Philip. There are any number of interesting dialogues, really. Philip talking to his sister, Philip talking to his wife. It's almost like a Socratic dialogue uh, going on. Would
I,
you agree?
I I do. Well, I don't know about Socratic. I don't know how to. Patrick, you've read more books than I have, and you're smarter about these things. I was just telling a story about somebody that had a sister.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my relationship with my sister, for instance. I'm looking at my relationship with my wife, for instance. How would I approach it? So I wasn't trying to do anything big, but just present human beings as being human.
Yeah.
In this particular case with his sister, the sister goes to the church. I needed to pull him into the case, and so at first she started out as a pawn, literally to
Right.
pull him into the case, because that's one of the things that we always have to ask ourselves when we are writing about when our protagonist is an independent detective who does not have the what can I say the rights to investigate a case, doesn't have the
Right,
mandate. So you first of all have to sort out how does he get the mandate, you know? And in this particular case, he got the mandate through his sister, you
right,
know, and then she was also a tool to my mind that I used to honor people of true faith, people of yeah, true faith, you know,
right,
people who who and I think I've gotten this a lot from my friends, some readers that are what you can say, I don't want to use the word genuine Christians, that's judgmental, but are true believers in a sense. And I would expect sometimes that the kind of feedback I would get would be, oh, wow, why would you say this about the church? Why would you say this about organized religion or whatever? But what I've constantly gotten is this is a story that needs to be told, and we like the way you've respected people of genuine faith, people that truly were gaslit, you know. I'm very, 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 I'm very happy about that. Of all the feedback that I've gotten, I think that's the feedback that always lifts me up, you know, and inspires me. This idea that through someone like Philip's sister, you're able to show that there are people that have genuine faith and have good intentions, um, and are willing to fix things if they see that something has gone wrong and not just go blindly with the group think. I think
right.
that yeah. But in terms of his relationship or her relationship with Philip, it's interesting because I had a lot of fun writing them because you know just pitching them against each other in terms of ideology. And then those are conversations that have also happened in real life. We know when you're talking with other people of the same faith, and you're like, why do you think that this is right? You know, what gave you this? You know, where did this bias come from? You know, in the case of Kenny, who is also a twin, like her brother. She is an accomplished accountant and auditor, you know. But it seems as if as soon as she gets to the church, she just suspends all disbelief, you know.
Right.
She suspends all rational thinking, you know. Very successful in her mid 40s, and sometimes she sounds as if, you know, she has had a lobotomy, so to speak, you know. Um, and I sort of
That
like
seemed very real. That seemed very realistic. Because
exactly.
we all know people like that, and some of us are like that, where there are these huge contradictions and uh
And I love this part. It's not a spoiler, guys. This part where she talks about her husband, you know, and somebody said apparently Philip's wife said something like because her husband is an atheist and
yes,
she's a you know her husband is an atheist and she's a fundamentalist Christian and and Philip's wife says something like it's like watching Reagan and Hillary Clinton
right.
married.
I remember that part. Yeah, that's a great comparison.
You know, kind of thing. You know, but that's just why I had so much fun with that character, and actually how she also changed because her change as a character is one of the most for me organic part of it. The more that was revealed in the story, the more she found out, the more she had to change her perception, and sometimes my heart broke totally for her as more became revealed, and she had to literally have to change her perception about this world that she has created for herself.
Right, right. Now, talking about about cults and about um a little while ago you were talking about how people are drawn to them for different reasons. Um, I think a lot of people that are kind of sucked into cults go in, maybe, I mean, they're often at a very vulnerable point in their life. Maybe they've just gone through a some sort of really traumatic event. And it seems like most people are simply searching for a connection, and unfortunately, you know, they're, they're very vulnerable and open to manipulation.
I think I think so too. But the thing about I don't know about people wanting. I think we all want to be witnessed. I think we all want to be to to be part of something greater than us. Um, and and religion does give us that,
Right.
especially in cultures cultures like ours where there's a lot of poverty, for instance. There's a lot of what you can say, a lack of hope. You know, so to me, I think that it's more than people going to church or people going to the mosque, or people becoming Buddhists. I like to generalize it like that because what we're talking about is organized religion. We're not talking about, we just use the church as an example. And this is
Mhm.
not an indictment on the church. This is an indictment on our on our very, very human ability to edify and elevate individuals above beliefs. You know, and we do it all the time. I do it, I subscribe to Oprah's channel. And she's like, okay, I think you should read this book. And I'm like, it should be a good book because Oprah has good taste. But guys, seriously, you
Right.
know, I subscribe to somebody that is just a TikTok dancer that tells me, I think you should have pasta for dinner today. I'm like, that sounds like a good idea, kind of thing, So what I'm saying is that there's this, it's very primal, again, this idea that of elevating individuals above principles and morals and values. And that is really what I'm much more concerned about. So when people go to what made people go to this organized spaces, I think is a need for structure, it's a need for order, it's a need to make sense of the chaos of the real world, and to sort of be able to say, this I can predict. On Sunday, I go to church. Life is a mess between Monday and Friday, but on Sunday, on Sunday, unfailingly, then we'll stand and sit and then we'll sing the hymns, for 2 hours. I can predict everything is okay with the world, and I think we cannot deny people that respite, you know,
Sure.
we can't deny people that respect. So the reason why people go sort of fades into insignificance as to the reasons why they stay.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, the reason why they stay in the face of scandals, in the face of being of seeing financial impropriety, for instance, in the face of giving your widow's mite and having a pastor that has a private jet, for instance, and you still stay. That is really what is fascinating to me, because it's
Mhm.
okay to go to church because you have a problem and you want a solution, you want a miracle. But in the face of being given proof of impropriety
Yeah.
that negates the very values that brought you there, but you still stayed, I don't have an answer for it. But I know that that's the interest and that's the story, you
Right.
know. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. There are a couple of questions that have come in from our readers who are watching. Um, and one of them is,
Really? People
yeah,
are watching.
people are watching and they have questions.
Oh,
Um, let's see.
okay.
What does your spouse think of your novels?
Oh, my spouse. Oh, okay. Okay. Gaslight was dedicated to her because she really, really gave me a lot of space to write that book. It was a very difficult book to write. Um, and she was the first person that read the full manuscript. And I remember that she walked downstairs from the bedroom. You can see there's a little, that goes up there. She walked downstairs from the bedroom and she had tears in her eyes and it's like, oh, what a beautiful ending, what a beautiful ending. And I felt really, really accomplished because there is nothing worse than writing a story, 90,000 words plus, that leaves the audience, might be interesting, might be fascinating, but that leaves the reader the way you left them. But I was very, very, very moved by the fact that she felt it so deeply, especially the family story part of it. The
Right.
family story part of it. She really, really related with it much, and she gave me a lot of advice. So my spouse, I don't know whether she has much choice, but she loves my books, and she's my biggest champion.
That's great. Here's a question about where did you study creative writing? And were there any mentor figures that really helped you along the way?
Okay, I think the first one is that like I said, I've always written. I do a lot of courses. My friends joke that I'm a perennial student. I'm constantly going to school. You don't want to see all the schools, short courses, long courses. Things like that. I love school. I really, really love school. But for creative writing, I went to University of East Anglia, and I did my master's in crime writing. And my first book was my thesis. And Gaslight is my PhD thesis.
Oh, okay.
So we don't know what the third one will be, but I'm desperately looking for a course to help me through that one. Yeah. Then the second question was mentors, figures. I, I don't believe in one mentor. People come to your life and they just say one word. You know, I think I wrote the novel Lightseekers because of a dead writer, Toni Morrison. And I always say, I just saw that quote and it was in my son's school. We went for a parents teachers meeting and I saw it in the cafeteria, a big sign that says, if there's a book that you want to read but has not yet been written, then you must write it. Toni Morrison. And
Mm,
I was like, wow, paraphrase, by the way. Wow, it's true. And I know that in my heart, I was looking for a book like Lightseekers on the shelves. I was looking for African authors like myself next to a David Baldacci, next to a Stephen King, next to Dan Winslow, next to my favorite authors. And I was tired of seeing almost all our stories relegated to African writing. What does that mean? What does it mean, African writing? Why is there no American writing? Why is there no American sci-fi? Kind of thing. Would it surprise people to find out that Margaret Atwood is Canadian? For instance, is there Canadian writing? Kind of thing. So
yeah.
those questions used to go through my mind, maybe because I'm in advertising, and marketing and branding is my world. So I really wanted to do something that I felt could break through the clutter, but is still authentic to my world and my lived experience as an African man. So yeah, the stories I tell, and the courses that I've been through, and the places the experience that I've had, I've met different people that have mentored me and guided me and given me one line of advice, held my hands. I was very privileged some months ago to meet Lee Child, and I was just in the middle of signing a new contract. And I was saying, oh yeah, but the money, the advance. And he just looked at me and said, he's a very tall guy. He just looked at me
Yeah.
and said, Femi. I said, sir, he said, go where the love is. Go where the love is. And I thought that was just brilliant advice, brilliant. And in that moment, he was my mentor. In that
Right.
brief moment when we're standing there, he was my mentor. I've been mentored by my kids, teaching me how
Sure.
to be a parent, because that's what kids do. They teach you how to be a parent. So the idea of having one mentor has never appealed to me, but
Mm,
to actually be in a situation whereby you're open to the feedback and the experiences, shared experiences that other people have, you know, for you, um, is invaluable for me, you know. And last point is that I always have what I call my group of first readers club. I call them my first readers club, where I have this group of 8 to 10 readers that are my friends that are all over the world, some lawyers, some writers, some would not pick up a book to save their life. They're only reading it because it's me, kind of thing. And I create a WhatsApp group and I would share excerpts from my stories with them and they will give me feedback. And that has been very invaluable. So if you go to the acknowledgement parts of my books, you always see my first readers group, they are always there. Some I've never met, by the way. The most the most impactful person to my writing in the past, especially for Gaslight, is is an American lady that lives in Boston that we met on a creative writing course, and I've never seen her. We've never met
really?
physically, but
That's
we've never met. But we practically talk every week. She's like my pen pal.
so you've never had a Zoom meeting with her or anything?
No, nope, nope,
That's wonderful.
nope. She's in her 70s. She's also a writer, and I call her Auntie A. You know, she be anti accountability. Because she holds us accountable, kind of thing. And she's just amazing. So they come from anywhere. As the more open you are to these experiences, the more the universe brings the people that you need.
Yes, that's
You
right.
know, to push through, to pull through. And you've got to honor those things because those are mentors, those are angels,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but books can be
Okay,
mentors. You come across the right book at the right time, it can change your life,
absolutely,
significantly.
absolutely. I think for me, but the book that did that for me was John Ivan's The Son of the Circus. I think it's one of his least celebrated works, and it's one of my favorite books of all time. And I remember reading this book, and it was the forward that got me. He says he's writing a story about India, and he has only been to India once. And I was just coming from this school of thought to say, write what you know. I'm like, there's a contradiction here, So I picked up this book and I read it, and it was one of the wittiest and most hilarious and most wise books that I've ever read. And it told me that the world of fiction is so robust and so flexible and so anti-fragile that you just have to embrace it. And that book mentored me because it allowed me to see the power of the human imagination, the power of the human imagination to create experiences for people to journey through. And he wrote it from one visit to India, you know.
Hmm.
So for me, yes, you're very right. Books mentor. Another book that did that for me was also William Styron's Sophie's Choice. You know, one of my favorite all-time favorite books. I also loved A Little Life by Anya Yana. I cannot pronounce that name. A
Is
Little
it
Life is also one of those books. Hmm?
is that a good book? I keep seeing it everywhere, but I have not read it yet. The Japanese writer, right?
No, it's she's from Hawaii. She's American.
Okay.
Yeah, A Little Life.
I'm thinking of a different book. I might be thinking of a different book.
I think it's a different book you're thinking about because A
Yeah.
Little Life was shortlisted for the Booker, and you either hate it or you love it. It was one of my favorite books for almost half a decade since it came out. Um, it was a very traumatic book, but I think it's just so so well written, really, really well written in terms of, again, relationships and, existential questions,
Mm.
and trauma. A lot of people call it trauma porn. It is trauma porn. It's a bit over the top, not a bit, extremely over the top, but it's so well written. It's well written, over the top melodrama. And so I don't think there's any story that required us to books that don't limit our ability to experience the world and to see and to elevate our powers of empathy are good mentorship books.
Well, this is kind of a good note to end on. I mean, at the beginning, I was struck by something you said at the very beginning of the talk, which was, my writing has made me a better person. And you don't hear people say that very often. And that's what a great kind of thing to say or to be aware of, you know.
I think so. I think it has, because if you're genuinely if you're genuinely curious about the world that you're exploring and the experiences that your characters are going through, they speak to you and they give you little warnings, whisper. I would type some things, I would type a particular kind of dialogue, and I'm like, oh, you've been guilty of this. You've got to go say sorry, kind of thing. I would go through that. I think I'm a better person. I like myself a lot more than, you know, and I think the idea of having a published book that you can go back and read, and see how you've grown. I think
Yeah.
Gaslight is a much more humane book, um, a lot less ambitious than Lightseekers, but it's the kind of book that I don't think that I could have written when I was 30 or when I was in my early 40s, as simple as one can say the book is. Um, and I think that's what makes the art of writing. On that note, we can end the art of being an author such a lifelong journey of growth, because you never really retire, right? And you get better with age, with the experiences that you have. The books that you write when you're a parent is different from the books that you write when you're a grandparent, and it's different but books that you write, knock on wood, when you're a great grandparent,
Right.
or a grand uncle, or a grand, you know auntie. So it's not just about, I'm just using that as phases of life, but same thing, the books that you write when you're, starting your career and you're very ambitious. When you think about David Baldacci's books when he was,
Yeah.
a lawyer, juggling two jobs. And then you get to when now he's in a place where he knows he's an author and he's writing and he's telling a story. It's very different. There's even sometimes you can even sense, for people like us that came to the game late, you can even sense our desperation, you know. And then when you get better at it, in a sense, and when you're more sure of yourself that you have that publishing deal, the stories take a different tone. A bit more confidence comes into it, and a bit more wisdom and self-introspection comes into it, and you're allowed to be. And I'm enjoying that. I really am enjoying that.
Can you tell us anything about your third book?
Yeah, my third book is started doing the research. Um, Philip Taiwo is going to be investigating a plane crash in the skies of Nigeria. And he will have to deal with the fact that he might not be going back to the US as early as he thought. So it's looking at the aviation industry. Uh, I'm trying to look at the systems and the institutions around aviation in Africa, specifically Nigeria in this case. And yeah, so that's what it is. It's called, I don't know. I don't have my title approved yet, but I like it so far. The first one I had was not working, but now I like it. It's called Dark Fall in my head. So it's looking at a plane crash and the safety issues of flying in Nigeria and all the systemic issues that go into the aviation industry in Nigeria.
Sounds fascinating. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
Femi, it's been a real treat to talk with you. Thanks so much. I know we've run a little bit late, folks, but um, here's the brand new book called Gaslight. We have copies here at the Poison Pen. And one of these days, it would be wonderful to get you out here in person.
I would love that.
Wouldn't that be fun? Yeah.
That would be fun.
Do you get over to the States very often?
My son goes to UC Denver.
Well, that's pretty darn
Uh,
close. That's not far
I
from
think
us.
I think not too far. So I'm hoping that I'll go see him sometime this year. So I will definitely get in touch.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
That would
But
be
I do come to the States once in a while, but I go to the UK a lot more because it's closer.
sure. Right.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, Femi, congratulations on the publication of the book. Wonderful to talk to you. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and
Thank you. And
we'll
sorry for the internet connection.
no problem. Take care. Good night.